At 0217, a thermal imaging screen lit up with a shape that made the operator stop breathing. 24 tubes, tank chassis, engine heat blooming white against the frozen ground. Sitting in a field in Belgorod Oblast, Russian territory, like it owned the night. It did, because that shape was a TOS-1A Solntsepyok, and nothing on this battlefield was built to do what it does. Here's what a full salvo looks like from the receiving end. 24 rockets leave the rails in 6 seconds. They don't explode on impact, not yet. First, each warhead splits open and sprays a cloud of aerosolized fuel across everything in its path. The cloud seeps into trenches, flows around corners, slides through the slits of a bunker door. Then, a fraction of a second later, detonation. A wall of fire the height of a 9-story building. 40,000 square meters, that's 10 acres, erased in a single breath. The blast wave hits first. Then comes something worse, the vacuum. Every cubic meter of oxygen consumed. The pressure drops so fast it ruptures lungs from the inside. You don't burn to death, you suffocate while on fire. There is no bunker deep enough, no trench narrow enough. Russia's own military says this weapon has no equal in the West. And tonight, it was pointed at Ukrainian positions, loaded and ready, waiting for a fire mission that would leave nothing alive. That machine costs $15 million. It weighs 46 tons. It sits on the chassis of a T-72 main battle tank, with armor designed to stop anti-tank rounds. The thing flying toward it costs $50. The Bulava Unmanned Systems Battalion of Ukraine's 72nd Mechanized Brigade had 4 FPV drones for this mission. 4. Each one gets a single flight, a single chance. Miss, and you've lost the drone, revealed your position, and the crew of that Solntsepyok now knows someone is hunting them. At which point, they have 2 options, run or fire.
And if they fire, the math is already done.
6 seconds, 10 acres, no survivors. 4 drones, 1 target, 0 room for error. But between the operators and that launcher sat something they couldn't see, couldn't outrun, and couldn't shoot. Russia's electronic warfare blanket, and it was already listening. The reconnaissance drone had been circling for 11 minutes. On the operator's monitor, a thermal canvas. White is hot, black is cold, and everything between is a guess. Belgorod Oblast at 2 in the morning is full of heat signatures. Truck engines cooling down, generator exhausts, a farmhouse chimney. Each one a white smear on the screen that could be anything. The operator's job was to find one specific shape among dozens of ghosts, and he couldn't afford to guess wrong, because every second he spent searching was a second that machine could start moving. Then he saw it, a long rectangular heat bloom with a row of even, circular openings across the top. No military vehicle on Earth has that silhouette. 24 tubes, side by side, glowing faintly with residual engine heat. It hadn't been there on the last pass. The Solntsepyok had driven in, parked, and gone quiet, which meant it was staged for a fire mission, waiting for coordinates, waiting for the order that would turn 10 acres of Ukrainian positions into ash. The operator tagged the position and passed it up the chain. The answer came fast. Kill it, now. Here's the problem. An FPV drone isn't a missile. There's no fire and forget. The operator flies it in real time, goggles on, hands on the sticks, seeing exactly what the drone sees through a camera the size of a thumbnail. At night, that camera is a thermal imager. Everything is shades of white and gray. No depth perception, no reference points. Just a ghostly landscape scrolling past at 120 kilometers per hour while you try to thread a 2-kilogram warhead into a target you can barely make out through the static. And tonight, the static was winning. 30 seconds into the first drone's flight, the video feed stuttered. Tore, came back in fragments. Russian electronic warfare was pushing broadband interference across the area. Not targeted jamming, just a wall of noise designed to shred any unencrypted signal within range. The operator's screen flickered between thermal image and white snow. Flying blind at 120 an hour, somewhere over Russian soil, with a shaped charge strapped to the airframe, he held the course. The feed stabilized, partially. Enough to see, enough to fly. The Solntsepyok filled the screen, close now, too close to turn back. And right there, in the last 3 seconds of the drone's existence, the operator faced the decision that would determine everything. Aim for the launcher, the 24 tubes packed with thermobaric rockets, or aim for the engine deck and make sure this thing never moves again. He picked the launcher. The drone hit the launcher assembly dead center. On the thermal screen, a white flash swallowed the silhouette. Then, nothing. Static. The feed died the instant the drone did. That's the cruel math of a kamikaze strike. You see the target, you see the approach, you see the moment of impact, and then your eyes are gone. No damage assessment, no confirmation, just a dead screen and a question that doesn't answer itself. Did it kill? A shaped charge punches armor by turning its copper liner into a superheated jet, a needle of molten metal moving at 8 kilometers per second. Against the frontal plate of a T-72, that jet might gouge a wound and stop, but the operator hadn't aimed at the front. He'd aimed at the launcher rack, tubular steel, rocket casings, and the thin upper deck beneath them. Places where 46 tons of armor mean nothing, because there's barely any armor at all. The reconnaissance drone was still circling. Its thermal feed told half the story. The Solntsepyok was lit, a bright thermal bloom spreading from the launcher assembly, hotter than before. Damage, yes. Fire, maybe. But the ammunition hadn't cooked off. 24 rockets, each a 220mm thermobaric warhead, still sat in those tubes. Burning, perhaps, but not detonating. And on thermal, the engine block still glowed. The machine was alive. Drone count? 3. Second FPV off the rail. Same approach, same static, same blinding sprint through electronic noise. But this time, the operator had something the first one didn't. A reference point. The fire from the first hit was a beacon on the thermal screen, a bright white smear that said, "Here, right here." The second drone slammed into the Solntsepyok's flank, just aft of the launcher. The thermal image flared white again. When the reconnaissance feed resolved, there were now 2 fires burning. The hull was wreathed in heat. Something inside was cooking, but slowly. No sympathetic detonation, no catastrophic kill. Just a 46-ton vehicle bleeding fire and smoke into the frozen air. 2 drones spent, 2 hits confirmed. The most dangerous weapon on the field was wounded, and still loaded. If you're watching this and you haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time. Hit like, hit subscribe, because the next 60 seconds nearly ended very differently. The question hanging over that field was simple and terrifying. Somewhere inside that burning chassis, a 3-man crew had just taken 2 direct hits. They were alive, the hatches hadn't blown, the hull hadn't cracked, and every one of them knew what they were sitting on top of. The decision they made next would decide whether this story ends with a burning wreck or a massacre. 2 drones left, 1 burning target, and a crew deciding whether to run, fight, or die where they sat. Inside the Solntsepyok, it was dark, loud, and getting hotter. The crew of a TOS-1A is 3 men, a driver in the front hull, a commander and a gunner squeezed into 2 small turrets at the rear. Their view of the world comes through periscopes and a targeting optic. At night, with no warning, from something too small and too quiet to register on any sensor they had, the first impact would have felt like a hammer blow from God. Metal screaming, a flash through the optics, then the second hit, and now the smell. Burning propellant, melting insulation, something chemical and wrong. They couldn't see what was hitting them. They didn't know how many were coming, and they were sitting on top of enough thermobaric fuel to flatten a city block. The driver had one job: get the engine turning and move. 840 horsepower under the floor, connected to tracks that could push this thing to 60 kilometers an hour on a road. But this wasn't a road. This was a frozen field at 2 in the morning with 2 holes in the hull and fires chewing through the launcher assembly above their heads. The engine might start, it might not. And even if it did, where do you drive when you can't see what's killing you? The operators of the Bulava battalion didn't give them time to find out. Third drone, off the rail. The thermal screen showed a target that was now impossible to miss. A white-hot bonfire on legs, leaking heat from every seam. The operator didn't need to search, didn't need to guess. He flew straight into the glow. Impact. 3 hits, 1 drone left. On the reconnaissance feed, the Solntsepyok had stopped moving. Whether the engine failed or the crew abandoned the attempt, the thermal image didn't say. It just showed a shape that was no longer a vehicle. It was a furnace. Fires in the launcher, fires in the engine bay, the hull itself radiating so much heat it was blinding the thermal camera at close range. But the ammunition still hadn't detonated. 3 hits. 3 shaped charges into a launcher loaded with thermobaric warheads, and the rockets were burning, not exploding. The casings were holding. The fuses hadn't triggered. Physics was keeping 24 warheads in a state between fire and apocalypse, and nobody knew which way it would tip. 1 drone left. 1. The last operator lined up the approach. No second chance. No backup. The drone that had cost less than a pair of sneakers was carrying the entire mission on its airframe. He sent it in. 4th impact. Direct hit. And then, silence. 1 second. 2. The reconnaissance drone caught what happened next. The thermal screen went white. Not a flash, not a flare. The entire frame, saturated. Pure white. The reconnaissance drone's sensor, designed to read temperature differences, had just been blinded by something that erased every difference at once. The first warhead cooked off at 226. The casing finally surrendered to the fire eating through it from the inside. When a thermobaric round detonates, it doesn't just explode, it breathes. The casing cracks. A mist of aerosolized fuel sprays outward, mixing with the air, filling every gap, every crevice, every pocket of space around the vehicle. For a fraction of a second, the Solntsepyok sat inside a cloud of vaporized death. Its own ammunition turned against it. Then the cloud ignited. 2,500 degrees. A pressure wave that would have buckled a concrete wall. And then, the vacuum. The same vacuum this weapon was designed to inflict on others. The air ripped inward, feeding the detonation, and in doing so triggered the next warhead. Then the next, then the next. A chain reaction of 24 thermobaric rounds, each one rupturing and feeding the fireball of the one before it. Nearly 5 tons of ordnance consuming itself in a single cascading detonation. The weapon built to leave no survivors left none of its own. When the reconnaissance drone's sensor recovered, the field had changed. Where the Solntsepyok had been, there was a crater surrounded by burning debris. The hull, what was left of it, had been torn open like a tin can, launcher tubes scattered across the frozen ground. The T-72 chassis that was supposed to protect this system from everything short of a direct tank round had been gutted from within. Russia calls this weapon scorching sun. Turns out, it scorches just fine without anyone pulling the trigger. 4 drones, 4 hits. Total cost of the operation, somewhere south of $200. The machine they'd just erased from the Russian order of battle was worth $15 million. That's a return on investment that would make a Wall Street quant weep. 75,000 to 1. The most expensive bonfire in Belgorod Oblast, lit by the cheapest match on the battlefield. Daylight confirmed what thermal had promised. The Bulava operators sent a daytime reconnaissance pass over the site. Scrap metal, blackened earth. A weapon that was supposed to terrorize an entire frontline sector, reduced to debris footage on a telegram channel. But the Bulava operators weren't done. While the world's most expensive bonfire was still smoldering, their reconnaissance drone had already turned south. Because 800 meters away, another thermal signature was sitting in the dark. Bigger turret, long barrel. A second target, completely unaware that the hunters were already overhead. The second signature was a Msta S, a 152mm self-propelled howitzer, the backbone of Russian artillery. 42 tons of armored gun platform, capable of dropping shells on a target 29 kilometers away. 50 rounds in the magazine. A weapon designed to kill from a distance so great you'd never hear the shot that got you. It hadn't heard the shot that got it either. The Bulava operators already had fresh drones in the air. Sane playbook, thermal lock, approach through the dark. The Msta S was parked, engine warm, crew presumably asleep or staring at a radio that wasn't telling them their neighbor had just been vaporized 800 meters north. The FPV came in fast and low. The operator put it straight through the gap between the turret and the hull, the ring where armor is thinnest and everything mechanical lives. The Msta S died quietly. No thermobaric fireball, no chain reaction. Just a shaped charge through the turret ring, a fire in the fighting compartment, and a very expensive piece of artillery that would never fire another round. 2 kills, 1 night, 1 battalion operating from a basement somewhere in Ukraine, reaching across an international border with machines that fit in a backpack. Now here's the math that should keep someone in Moscow awake at night. Russia started this war with roughly 39 TOS-1A systems. By the end of last year, open-source trackers had visually confirmed 34 destroyed, damaged, or captured. And that's only the ones caught on camera. The real number is almost certainly higher. Every loss is a hole that can't be filled quickly. The Solntsepyok is built on a T-72 chassis, the same chassis Russia is burning through faster than it can pull old ones out of storage. Production is small batch, specialized, slow. When one dies, the replacement timeline isn't weeks, it's months, maybe longer. Russia knows this.
That's why they built the TOS-3 Dragon, a redesigned launcher with anti-drone cages, electronic warfare pods, and enough reactive armor to stop a shaped charge. 15 tubes instead of 24, longer range, better protection. Russia's answer to the problem that killed the Solntsepyok in Belgorod. But here's the thing about answers. Ukraine purchased over 1 million FPV drones last year. The target for this year is 4.5 million. Each one costs less than a decent dinner. They're assembled by volunteers with screwdrivers and soldering irons. The TOS-3 costs millions, takes months to build, and requires a factory, a tank chassis, and a specialized crew. The drone requires a battery, a motor, and someone willing to fly it. That's not a weapons race. That's a math problem. And the math has already been solved. This was the first confirmed destruction of a TOS-1A on Russian soil. Not on the front line, not in occupied territory, on Russian ground, in a Russian oblast, where these systems were supposed to be safe. The Bulava battalion didn't just kill a weapon. They killed the idea that geography is still a shield. If you made it this far, drop a like and subscribe. Hit that bell so you don't miss the next one. I want to hear from you. How long before systems like the Solntsepyok become too expensive to even deploy? And while you're at it, tell me where you're watching from. I'm always curious. This is War Horizon. See you on the next one.